There is a moment most of us have experienced. You sit down to read a book or to work on something meaningful, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, your hand reaches for your phone. You were not consciously deciding to stop. You were not even aware of the urge until you were already scrolling. This is not a failure of willpower, it is something far more interesting. What we are experiencing is not simply distraction, it is a fundamental shift in how attention itself operates in the human mind, and the consequences reach far beyond productivity or time management. They touch the very core of who we become. This is a story about attention, not how to fix it, but what is actually happening to it, and why sustained focus has become one of the rarest psychological states in modern life. To understand what has changed, we first need to understand what attention actually is. In cognitive psychology, attention is not a single thing. It is a collection of systems working together. There is selective attention, your ability to focus on one thing while filtering out others. There is sustained attention, the capacity to maintain focus over time. And there is executive attention, the control system that decides where your focus goes. These systems evolved in environments radically different from ours. For most of human history, sustained attention was necessary for survival. Tracking an animal, listening for danger, completing a task before nightfall, but here is what is crucial. Attention has always been selective. The human brain receives roughly 11 million bits of sensory information every second. Your conscious mind can process about 40. Your brain is constantly making choices about what deserves focus. And those choices are not random. They are driven by relevance, novelty, and emotional significance. For millennia, the competition for your attention came from the natural world. A rustling in the bushes, a change in the wind, the face of another person. Now the competition comes from systems explicitly designed to win. Every app, every website, every digital interface has been refined through thousands of hours of testing to answer one question: how do we capture and keep attention? This is not metaphorical. Technology companies employ attention engineers, people whose job is to study the exact moment you might look away and to design an intervention that pulls you back. The result is an environment where your attention is under constant, sophisticated assault. Not from random distractions, but from stimuli engineered to exploit the very mechanisms that govern focus. The average person now touches their phone over 2,600 times per day. They shift their attention between tasks every 47 seconds on average. And when they try to focus on a single task for an extended period, they experience something that feels almost physical: discomfort. This discomfort is the key to everything. When you sit down to focus and feel that pull toward your phone, what you are experiencing is something psychologists call attentional residue. Every time you shift your attention from one task to another, part of your cognitive capacity remains allocated to the previous task. If you are writing an email and you glance at a text message, even after you return to the email, a portion of your mind is still processing the message. This residue accumulates. The more frequently you switch, the more fragmented your attention becomes, and the fragmentation creates a feedback loop. When your attention is fragmented, tasks feel harder. You experience more friction, more cognitive load, and when something feels hard, your brain seeks relief. The relief comes in the form of switching. Checking something else, opening a new tab, refreshing a feed. Each switch provides a tiny hit of novelty, a microdose of stimulation. And novelty triggers dopamine release, not as a reward, but as a signal that something potentially important is happening. Your brain is not trying to distract you. It is trying to help you. It is searching for information that might be relevant, but in an environment where novelty is infinite and algorithmically delivered, this search never ends. You might open your phone to check one thing and find yourself 20 minutes later having completely forgotten what you opened it for. This is not forgetfulness. It is attentional cascade. Each new stimulus triggers a new attentional shift. Each shift leaves residue. The residue creates discomfort. The discomfort drives you to seek relief through more switching. And the cycle continues. What is remarkable is how quickly this pattern becomes automatic. Research in habit formation shows that behaviors repeated in consistent contexts become triggered outside of conscious awareness. You do not decide to check your phone when you are bored. The context of boredom itself becomes a trigger. You do not choose to open social media when you feel uncertain about a task. The uncertainty triggers the behavior before you have consciously registered the feeling. Over time, your attentional system reorganizes itself around these patterns. Sustained focus becomes not just difficult but foreign. The mental state required for deep work starts to feel like something you once knew how to do but can no longer access. This is where something deeper begins to happen. There is a question that often gets overlooked in discussions about attention. What are we distracting ourselves from? The obvious answer is the task at hand, the work we are supposed to be doing. But the real answer is more complex. We are distracting ourselves from how the task makes us feel. Sustained attention requires something that has become increasingly rare: tolerance for discomfort. When you focus on a single task for an extended period, you encounter resistance. The work is harder than you expected. You are not sure if you are doing it right. You feel the gap between your current ability and where you want to be. These feelings are aversive, and in the past you had limited options for escaping them. You could take a break, go for a walk, make a cup of tea. But the relief was temporary and finite. Now escape is instant and infinite. The moment you feel uncertain, you can search for the answer. The moment you feel bored, you can open a feed, engineered to be endlessly engaging. The moment you feel inadequate, you can scroll through content that makes you feel informed, connected, or entertained. Distraction has become an emotional regulation strategy. And like all regulation strategies, the more you use it, the more you need it. There is a concept in psychology called affect tolerance, your ability to experience uncomfortable emotions without immediately acting to eliminate them. Affect tolerance is built through exposure. You feel something uncomfortable. You sit with it. You discover that you can survive it. Over time, your capacity expands, but when you have a tool that eliminates discomfort instantly, you never build that capacity. Instead, you build the opposite: a heightened sensitivity to any form of mental friction. The feeling of not knowing something immediately becomes intolerable. The experience of boredom feels like an emergency. The sensation of working on something difficult without instant feedback feels like failure. This is why sustained focus has become so rare. It is not that the tasks themselves have become harder. It is that our tolerance for the feelings that accompany focus has atrophied. And there is a deeper layer still. Many of the emotions we are avoiding are not about the task at all. They are about ourselves. When you sit alone with your thoughts with no input, no stimulation, no external validation, you encounter something most people find deeply uncomfortable: yourself, your doubts, your fears, your sense of not being enough. Constant stimulation becomes a way of never having to face these things. Not consciously, not as a deliberate choice, but as an automatic pattern that keeps you perpetually occupied. All of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly alone. This is not about attention spans, it is about avoidance. What we are witnessing is not just a crisis of focus, it is a crisis of presence. The way you pay attention does not just affect what you do, it affects who you become. Your sense of self, your identity, is constructed from memory, and memory is built from attention. You remember what you pay attention to. If your attention is fragmented, your memories become fragmented. Your sense of continuity, of narrative, of a coherent self moving through time begins to dissolve. People often describe this feeling as a kind of fog. They cannot quite remember what they did last week. The days blur together. They have the unsettling sense that time is passing, but they cannot account for where it went. This is not early onset cognitive decline. It is a direct consequence of fragmented attention. When you are constantly switching between tasks, contexts, and stimuli, your brain does not encode experiences as distinct events. It encodes them as a continuous stream of low-level stimulation. Streams do not have landmarks. They do not have moments you can point to and say that happened. The effects go beyond memory. Flow states, moments of complete absorption in an activity, are among the most meaningful experiences people report in their lives. Not because they are always pleasant, but because they provide a sense of agency, competence, and growth. Flow requires sustained attention. Sustained attention requires an environment relatively free from interruption. When flow becomes rare, people begin to feel like observers rather than participants. They consume experiences instead of creating them. They scroll through other lives instead of authoring their own. Decision-making changes, too. Sustained attention is necessary for slow, deliberate, analytical thinking. The mode that handles complex decisions. When attention is fragmented, people default to fast, intuitive thinking. Fast thinking is efficient, but it is also prone to bias, emotional reactivity, and shortcuts. Complex decisions about relationships, careers, and values require sustained attention. When you lose that capacity, you react instead of respond. You choose what feels good now instead of what matters later. Over time, this invisibly shapes your life. You take the path of least resistance, avoid difficult conversations, defer important decisions, not because of weakness, but because the mental state required for complexity has become inaccessible. When attention fragments, your relationship to truth changes. Deep understanding requires sustained engagement with nuance and ambiguity. Without it, people mistake information for understanding, exposure for expertise, and because everyone else is experiencing the same shift. It becomes normal. The most unsettling aspect of attention loss is how difficult it is to recognize. When you live in fragmentation, it feels normal. You forget what deep focus felt like, and because you forget, you cannot miss it. Certain experiences quietly disappear. Finishing something difficult, extended contemplation, being fully present with another person, they do not announce their absence. They simply fade. You may feel entertained but unsatisfied, connected but lonely, busy but empty. These are not personal failures. They are structural effects. You are adapting to an environment that demands constant partial attention. The adaptation works, but something is being lost. The capacity to dwell, to stay past discomfort, to access understanding. Attention is how you make contact with reality. When attention fragments, so does connection. In a world optimized for distraction, attention becomes an act of resistance. Not against technology, but against the disappearance of depth itself. Where does this leave us? Not with solutions, not with hacks, with awareness. When you see the pull clearly, that your relationship to attention changes. The question is no longer, how do I focus better? It becomes, what deserves my sustained attention? And what am I willing to give up to protect it? These questions require time. Silent, sustained thought. The very things you have been trained to avoid, which is precisely why they matter.